Graham, I want to ask you about Osama bin Laden.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just because you told me this story, and I thought it was really interesting. I thought people might want to hear what happened there.
Well, they announced that Osama bin Laden had been shot. And I remembered an old joke about meeting Hitler in the rainforest when you've written an American TV show. And when you meet Hitler and he recognizes you and says, "Oh, I watch your show," the moral dilemma is, do you turn him in? So this was a joke that American screenwriters used to share. So when Osama bin Laden died, I thought I would pretend that he had been watching the IT Crowd when he was shot. And I did a joke about, you know, maybe he wasn't so bad, you know. But as happens with Twitter, because it's a very literal medium, everyone believed me. And rather than thinking, maybe I shouldn't add to the amount of disinformation in the world, I contacted people in France and said, can you pretend that you've seen a news report and write it in French? And they did that. And soon everyone believed that. I also said there's footage. There's apparently footage of him watching.
So you are a purveyor of fake news.
Well, someone said Graham Linehan invented fake news with the Osama bin Laden trick. But like, I thought most people would know it was nonsense. And then my punchline at the end was I live tweeted that the CIA had sent me the video, sent me this a DVD or something it was that time of the action. So I live tweeted myself watching it, and I revealed at the end that he had actually been watching The Big Bang Theory. And I went back to calling him a monster.
Well, The Big Bang Theory would make more sense with him, I think.
I guess so, especially at that moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're a bit of
I also did, I mean, I'm kind of, the only reason I'm sad I don't have my Twitter account anymore is the other thing I lost is probably, outside of the TV shows, is probably the funniest thing I ever did. I'm so proud of it. And it's one of those jokes that's so good I can't rewrite it because I know the original is much better. And I pretended to live tweet the running of the bulls in Pamplona. And all I did was I just wrote loads of unfinished sentences. So I'd be like one tweet just went, "A bell is," and then the next tweet said, "I've lost my little white handkerchief." This was a huge, and then cut off. And so it was, and then again, I had people going, "I don't know how you could go to that."
You are fond of mischief. I also believe you've been on a lesbian dating site.
Yes, well, that was, unfortunately, like, my problem is I'm a comedy writer, so no one spotted that one was actually serious. My point there was that men were doing this for real.
Yeah.
And they were calling themselves lesbians. They looked exactly like me, as if they'd forgotten they would be on television. And, you know, some of them took the trouble to put some lipstick on, but most of them didn't even do that.
Yeah.
And they're all calling themselves she, her, and they're on this dating app for lesbians, and if lesbians complain, they're thrown off.
Yeah, so it's a very serious point.
Yeah,
Expressed
but then I
comedically,
forgot that, like, you know,
yeah.
No one expects me to make serious points.
So, I mean, let's talk a bit about the Father Ted musical, because, of course, Father Ted, one of the best sitcoms of all time, and I think it was 5 years ago, you finished, or you were in the process of putting it together as a musical theatre piece.
Yes, a little over 3 or 4 years, around 4, let's say 4 years.
And it's written with Arthur Matthews, who's the co-creator of Father Ted, and Neil Hannon from the Divine Comedy, writing the songs. It's all finished. Can you talk to us about that process? Whose idea was it to do this, and how did it come together?
It was my idea. I'm always on the lookout for something that seems like a thing. As soon as I see a thing is happening, I think that might be useful. And the thing that kept happening for me was that people who didn't really have the temperament to be in important jobs started getting important jobs, namely Trump and Corbyn. And the fact that there were two at the same time that seemed very unsuited for their job, I thought, oh, maybe Ted can become a cardinal, you know?
Well, people do fail upwards, don't they?
Yeah, well, that's it. So Ted was failing upwards, and I had that idea. Someone sent me a book called The Secret Life of the American Musical. which is a kind of a brilliant history of the American musical, but done in the structure of which song goes where. So opening song, main character song, etc., etc., etc. It provides a structure while also allowing for you to have fun and be creative within it. So I used that to mark out where the songs would go and what kind of songs they would be. I knew I'd need a Mrs. Doyle song, a Ted song, songs that kind of expressed who they were, deep down, I guess, but still trying to be comic, you know.
Yeah.
And we did all that. The script went through a number of, what usually happens with a script is that usually it's way too complicated. And as soon as we simplified it, as soon as we brought it right back down to what it was about for each character, it just transformed, and it's been in great shape ever since.
Because people don't realise with musicals, there is that structure which is there, which you can play with, but there's always like an I want number, an 11 o'clock number, and all these sorts of things.
Like the South Park musical was a model in the sense that, you know, they took the conventions and completely ripped them apart.
Yeah.
You know, so. That was a big inspiration.
And so you'd written this, and and of course the other thing, of course, is the songs often move the plot forward, don't they? So they're sort of an integral part of it. So when
I wish I could tell you more about it. Oh my God.
We're not allowed to talk much about the content, I suppose.
Well, you know, I mean, I still want it to be made.
Yeah, of course.
And I want people to be surprised by everything we have in it, you know. So
yeah. What happens at the end? No, we won't do that. But it is interesting, isn't it? Because it's been put on hold.
Not put on hold. They say they're not doing it. I think Hat-Trick need me to die before they'll put it on.
To explain to people, so Hat-Trick Productions are, of course, the production company that originally commissioned Father Ted. I mean, they commissioned this musical. Yeah. So they have the rights to it, and you've described it as that the musical is being held hostage, I think you said.
Yeah.
So can you tell us why that is? Why do they no longer want to make this? Obviously, I mean, it would be box office, right? Everyone would want to see this.
Yeah, the way I look at it is it's preemptive cultural vandalism. You know, it's something that's been cancelled before it even appeared. So I don't really know what to say, except, you know, it's they've never told me what I've done wrong. They've never told me what I've said that they disagree with. When I asked once, someone in the room rolled their eyes as if it was obvious. Yeah. And it's like, well, no, actually, it's not obvious. Mermaids is now going down because of our work. Well done to everyone here who helped that happen. We've been uncovering the effects of queer theory, the effects of safeguarding being removed for these vulnerable children. The women who are losing their livelihoods and their jobs, Rosie, who's here, I think, you know, all of these matters are, you know, I think we've been vindicated completely. Yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. And, of course, you've been so vocal about this for so long, and you've paid the price. I think it's always the case with these kind of cultural hysteria. The first people to speak out are the ones to be punished, effectively. But it does make it easier for people later on.
Oh, I hope so. That was always the plan. I just didn't think it would take everyone so long to turn up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe explain to some people, because obviously, just in case people don't know, that's the police coming for Graham right now. You've been very vocal about your view that women shouldn't be monstered as TERFs, trans-exclusionary radical feminists, or demonised simply for saying that their rights partly depend on an acknowledgement of biological reality and that their spaces should be preserved. And you've made this case. You've been called a transphobe, hateful, far-right, you name it, all of that stuff, for simply making these points, which are actually a very liberal point of view.
You know, everybody just assumed all this to be true like 5 minutes ago, like Douglas Murray often says.
Yes.
You know, and people walk into these traps that they didn't even know were there, you know. Like, whenever I see someone apologise, I just think, no, never, ever apologise.
And when people say, but there is no... We were talking earlier about Graham Norton's comment that there was no such... that cancel culture should be called accountability.
But again, accountability for what? For revealing that children are being hurt, you know? That like, I found out from Elaine Miller, who's a physiotherapist, that young girls who are on testosterone for enough amount of time will go into the menopause 30 years too early. Yeah. None of these kids are being told this. They're being sold a vision of transitioning. Ben Cohen did a poster of just a man with a flat chest and hair on his chest and called it Trans Joy. How many young kids will have read that and thought that, you know, this is just a wonderful way to express themselves? It carries massive medical consequences. And these kids just are being lied to, and they're they're grooming each other. They're being groomed by bad actors. Not you know, the Harry Potter gang, but like you know, it's a huge society-wide problem. I've been contacted by Scottish rape victims who can't go to rape crisis services because there's a man in charge of Edinburgh Rape Crisis. I've been contacted by therapists who, one therapist said, these young kids come in tears because they think J.K. Rowling wants them dead. And she can't tell them that it's not true because the kids might report her to her accreditation body.
So this is mass fantasy, you know.
It's a mass delusion. It's like the satanic panic or any mass delusion. But what it's had is the turbocharging power of the internet.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like these phrases that we often hear, you know, you're denying my right to exist, you're doing all this sort of stuff. They've basically just been grooming themselves with these phrases. I mean, I remember Navarro Media gave advice on how to lie to your doctor so you can quickly get drugs, you know. There's people at some protest, I think, that Posey did, or some counter-protest. There was someone with a billboard saying, "Speak to me, I'll tell you how to get these drugs." You know?
It's incredible.
It is incredible. And to have absolutely no adults in the room, to have the police being given training by mermaids and journalists not covering it for the most part.
What I don't understand is why we don't learn from history. As you say, the satanic ritual abuse panic of the 1980s wasn't that long ago, right?
Yeah.
And we know that kids were taken away from their families, perfectly innocent people's lives utterly destroyed by fantasists.
And here's another thing. Can someone remind me of the name who connects the satanic panic to this? Barbara? Diane Ehrenschaft. Diane Ehrenschaft, I think her name is. She said that babies know they're trans when they try to take off their onesies. That's like how they're showing you they're the opposite sex.
Well, she's obviously deranged.
Yeah, but she was a major part of the satanic panic.
Really?
Yes. So what you had, like, you know, the same kinds of people are being empowered by it. You know, people who see in the kind of incoherence of the movement of the you know, the language and the amount of genders and all this sort of stuff. It's a very easy way to make a few quid very quickly.
And finally, you know, we could talk about this all night. You know, there's so much to cover. But in terms of the creative side of things, I mean, you have been cancelled. I mean, you know, the phrase cancelled, it sometimes is misused. I get that. But, I mean, in your case, it's definitely true. You're not creating the comedy that you're so brilliant at.
Well, that's why I find Graham Norton, you know, so personally such a betrayal. You know, because one of the first things he did was his role in Father Ted. There's no way he cannot know about what's happened to me.
Yeah.
So for him to say there's no cancel culture, I don't know. I don't know what to say about it, but he's really disappointed me, you know.
Well, we are going to get some questions, if you don't mind, from the audience for you, because I think there's so much to discuss here. But before that, we're just going to have a quick break. See you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Free Speech Nation, here at Church House, the Battle of Ideas. I'm delighted to be joined by Graham Linehan. And I'd love to go to our audience here and see if they have any questions for Graham. Quite a few hands. There's a hand there at the back. Could someone get a mic to the lady there?
Hi, thank you. Regarding this issue of children being encouraged to transition early and all of the crazy things that are going on there, how can we, so to speak, be the adults in the room or the voices of reason? Besides, I really liked Graham's suggestion of not apologizing when you haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah. Well, just write letters to everyone you can think of. Write to your MP, write to your, you know, local council. You know, I always say to people, if anyone says the word cis, say, I'm sorry, I find that offensive. You know? I mean, it's going to have to be done one by one. It's going to have to, the society has been so captured. The extent of it is going to take a long time to fix, but it has to be fixed because we can't let this happen again. We're all, I used to say the internet was like we all grew a tail, you know, and if all humanity grew a tail, there might be a period where you forget to tuck it in when you're crossing a restaurant, right? And your plates go all over. Okay, forgot I had a tail. The internet is like we all gained a psychic connection almost to every other human being on Earth, right? We're all on stage for all our lives, and everything we say, I described it earlier as it's like hieroglyphics on a searchable wall, right? So we have this shared problem, and we need to get this one out of the way so we can say, how do we guard it against it? How do we stop ourselves from falling for these things again? And, you know, use this as a kind of learning experience, you know?
And it's interesting as well because a lot of this, what has been happening and escalating over the past 10 years, has done no favours, as far as I can see, for trans people, for people who have gender dysphoria, who are caught in the crossfire. One
of the first groups I met with, I mean, one of the ironies of my situation is I know more trans people than the people calling me transphobic. But, like, one of the groups I met early on were called TS Voices. And they were worried that self-ID would make all the rights they'd fought for suddenly just disappear. And it's true, like Debbie Hayton, who I have a lot of respect for because Debbie is constantly writing in defense of women, women's rights, and always uses the phrase, I'm a trans woman and I feel, you know, which really has helped. But Debbie's, you know, been through hell the last few years, you know, attacked from all sides. And I don't think he's going to come out of it, you know, entirely unscathed.
But that's, I mean, it's interesting there, for instance, with the pronoun issue, because you refer to him as he.
Yes.
And, you know, in the past, a lot of the trans people that I've known, and, you know, everyone was perfectly happy to indulge in this polite fiction of using the pronouns they want and the name they want.
Oh, I would still do it in private. I would still do it in private. I would still do it with certain people. But at this precise moment, I feel it's morally wrong to do it. Because I think that the effect... there's a brilliant essay everyone should read called Pronouns Are Rohypnol, you know? And... you know, like if you just look at a newspaper that says woman arrested for possessing thousands of paedophile images, you know, this whole period is going to seem like suddenly there were loads of female paedophiles, and it's not true. And every time you see anything like that, write and complain.
Well, it's bad journalism, isn't it? I mean, there was that article on the BBC that talked about an elderly woman in New York who had dismembered another woman. And had killed a few other women as well. And I was reading this thinking, it doesn't sound like an old woman. You know? I mean, I don't want to be discriminatory in my expectations, but I don't think that's... And at the end, as like an aside, almost like it didn't matter. Oh, this person has recently transitioned.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, OK. So why did you put woman dismembers woman in the headline?
Yeah,
you know?
it's fraud. It's fraud, and it's confusing people. People don't have a stable ground to argue their points on because they don't know the rules. They think, I think still a lot of people must believe that it's transsexuals who are causing all this when it's really not. It's like mostly straight men who you know, paint their fingernails. You know, it's not transsexuals. And the Stonewall's stretching of the umbrella of the word trans over everyone has allowed some very bad actors to kind of go along for the ride. And this happens every time there's a big... I was talking to my friend Arlie Morty, who I'm sure is here tonight. Yay, there he is. This happens every time there's a big civil rights push. There's always going to be some people who attach themselves to it. And the kind of similarities, and even some of the same characters with PIE, the Paedophile Information Exchange, who in the 70s and 80s, I think, had an extraordinary amount of success, despite the fact that they were called the Paedophile Information Exchange.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, everybody at that stage, they didn't want to, they saw the bravery of gay men at Stonewall, and they were told this is another civil rights issue. And they believed it for a while, until gay people stood up and said, no, actually, you know, you're not welcome in the movement.
We're going to get another question if we have one. Yes, gentleman with the beard. Oh, woman.
I identify as a leaf, thank you. Graham, I was wondering, with the success, an extraordinary success of Top Gun 2, which was deliberately non-woke, and conversely, the utter failure of very actively woke shows and films like She-Hulk and the female Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, why are producers whose only sole purpose of existence is the bottom line not basically changing gear?
Right.
I think they just think the Twitter audience is the real audience, you know? They think that, like, they're writing for these lunatics on Twitter rather than writing for a broad general audience. You know, I was saying it earlier, you know, diversity is trying to hit the biggest amount of people possible, you know? That's diversity. Trying to get everybody to come to the film or whatever it is. But there's all these decisions, and I'm sure people of colour, to use that phrase, feel the same way as I do when I see a diverse cast that's, to me, looks like 5 white people in different colours, you know? Like there's always an Asian person, there's always a black person, but it's always, they always feel like white middle class people. And that's I find that, like, again, it's another lie, you know? If you look at a film, any film by the Safdie brothers, that's true diversity. Like, that's extraordinary what they do. It feels real as a result, you know? But this stuff they're pushing down our throats, no one buys it. No one buys it.
Well, Graham, we are out of time, but just want to wish you good luck.
2 questions. I'm so